So today we're going to be making some bread, and I love making bread. There are so many different recipes and so many different types of bread that you can make. But I thought today we'd do a really simple little recipe. So even if you've never made bread before, you can try and join in. And we're going to makes a type of a ciabatta type bread. So it makes a couple of bread rolls and a nice soft white bread and a little bit chewy like that ciabatta taste. And it's a really easy recipe. All you need is 500 grams of flour, just plain white flour is fine. You need a little bit of salt. You need some dried yeast, and most supermarkets will sell it in these little packets that are just the right amount. And you need a little bit of warm water. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your yeast and just tip the whole sachet into your warm water. Now I've put about 300 mils of water in here. And this water should be warm but not hot. Right, you should be able to stick your finger in it and it just feels slightly warm to the touch. And that's just going to start getting your yeast working. But be very careful that it's not too hot because that will kill the yeast. Right, so give that a little mix round. You see it's starting to get a little bit frothy. There you go. Right, then all you have to do is pop your flour in your bowl. And you need about 7 grams of salt, but if you don't want to weigh it out, it's just a good sprinkle. Then just slowly start adding your water, a little bit at a time, because you might not quite want to use all of it. Start mixing round, and you should start to see as you add water, it comes together in a nice dough. There we go, it's starting to form a bit of a big lump, which is what you want. Now add a tiny bit more. When it starts to form one big lump and you can't really stir it anymore, then you have to get your hands dirty and get stuck in there. So I'm going to clean my surface a little bit. Right. Spoon. Right. Now tip it onto a nice clean surface. And make sure that there's a little bit of extra flour so it doesn't stick. And then get stuck in and start squishing it all together. Now this is where you have to be the judge. Because if it's super sticky and it's sticking to your fingers and you can't even squish it, then you probably need a bit more flour. And if it's super dry and the flour is just crumbling everywhere, then just go ahead and add a little bit more water. But what you want is for eventually, it all should come together in a nice dough that isn't too sticky. And then you can do, I think, the best bit of bread making, which is kneading the dough. It's very relaxing. So I'm going to put a bit of flour just on my table. I'm getting a bit sticky. And when you knead bread, you really got to put your back into it. And you're starting to stretch out the dough. And you're going to want to knead it for quite a while. Maybe give it a good 5-10 minutes or so. And by the end of it, you should have a nice bouncy, springy dough that's ready to rise. Right, and once you're done kneading, it's ready to rise. So what you do with that is you take a nice clean bowl And you can just pop a little bit of oil in the bowl, just a drop, and then make sure it's spread nicely all around the edges of the bowl, because it would be very sad if you came back and you couldn't get your dough out of the bowl. Okay, so then take your dough in a nice ball and just pop it in the bowl, and then I like to just cover it with a slightly damp tea towel. It stops the top of the dough drying out but still allows it to get nice and warm. Then just leave your dough in a nice warm place until it has about doubled in size. Normally takes maybe an hour, sometimes even just half an hour, depending on how warm it is where you leave it. So let's leave that to rise, and then we'll come back and we'll make some bread rolls. Okay, so it's the moment of truth. Let's have a look and see how well our dough has done. Right, it's a pretty good rise. It's come about doubled in size, and that's what you're looking for, and it's nice and springy on the top. If you poke it a little bit, it should bounce back. Now, while it was rising, you should have preheated your oven to quite a nice hot temperature. You want it at about 220 degrees, and when you pop your bread in at that temperature for a few minutes, the yeast will really get going and you'll get a good rise, and then you can turn it down a little bit to cook the bread later. Okay, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the bread into bread rolls and get them on a baking tray. So I'm going to take this out. The oil from the bowl should be enough to stop it sticking to your surface. Yep. And now it's up to you. You can do whatever size and shape you want. Just remember, the bigger and thicker they are, the longer they're going to take to cook. So it's up to you. I like them quite small. I'm just going to do this quite roughly, and then I can shape them. So I'm just going to make 4 or so rolls to show you, but you might be able to get a few more out of a normal recipe. Shape them into sort of slightly oblong shapes. And remember to leave a little bit of space in between them so they can rise. I'm going to put a bit more in the oven. Okay, so I've made 4 or so quite medium-sized bread rolls there. Okay, and then you just pop them straight into your hot oven and keep it at a high heat for the first couple of minutes, and about 200 or 220, and then turn it down to sort of more 180 for the last 5 or so minutes. But keep an eye on them and take them out when they're starting to look a little bit golden brown on the outside. And if you lift one up and tap it, it should sound a little bit hollow. So our bread has been in the oven for about 10 minutes. It's starting to get a little bit brown on the top, so I think it's ready to come out. Lovely. There is nothing better than the smell of warm, freshly baked bread. And the reason that we're thinking about bread today is because it's coming up to Easter, and we're remembering that Jesus died on the cross for us. But before he died, he had a last meal with his friends. It's called the Last Supper. And while they were all sitting around the table, he took some bread and he broke it in front of them, and he said to them, "This is like my body, which is going to be broken for you." And we today as Christians celebrate communion, and it's doing the same thing. It's taking bread and breaking it and drinking a little bit of wine or grape juice and remembering Jesus' body that was broken on the cross for us and his blood that was poured out for us, and remembering the sacrifice that he made so that even though we are sinful people and we can't come before God because of what Jesus did on the cross for us, he took away all that sinfulness, and we can come to God, we can have a relationship with God, we can be friends with God, And one day when we die, we can go to heaven to be with God forever. And that is why Easter is just so worth celebrating. So go and enjoy your bread and remember that Jesus' body was broken for you.